WESN.
I wonder if this may be a crossroads in our nation's history. Maybe, maybe not. You could never tell when it's happening, right? You can only tell in hindsight, when you could analyze everything after the dust is all settled. How important is this budget? Is the upcoming elections? Is this general time period when revenues are down, costs, while not increasing, are still potentially high, and ultimately speaking, where is there for hope to be found? No pun intended. With that said, Sean Michael Smallhead, this is Talking Point at WESN, Content Capital, continuing the discussion with regards to previewing what may we find out with the upcoming budget, as well as how that, of course, is all tied to the political landscape, because I would imagine there would be a lot of people paying attention to this budget to at least partially inform what they're going to do when the election comes about. Then again, voters' memories sometimes are quite short. We'll have to wait and see how the reactions will be. But part of what we like to do is to have a deeper conversation here on Talking Point. Maybe try to get to the more practical issues of the matter, not just the emotional arguments. Not necessarily speaking about what it is we want, but rather what it is we need. And to kick off this morning's discussions, at least somewhat on the political side, because there's a lot of politics to unpack in this, as small as we are. We have, well, political scientist Dr. Shay Mohammed. Good morning, Dr. Mohammed.
Good morning. What's going on?
So first of all, I just want to ask, what my take on it. I think this budget might be one of the most interesting / important budgets in the current administration's entire tenure. Because at the end of the day, I guess you could say it's something of a capstone. They have not necessarily been able to significantly change the direction of the economy in 10 years. Some of that is not their fault. Arguably, some of that could be their fault, right? It all depends on how you judge things. Am I right to say that this budget is that important? Is this budget to some extent going where no Trinbagonian has gone before? Because I'm not sure, we might actually be we might not have realized it yet, but this might be the time that we've all been talking about for the last 60 years. At some point, the gas will run out, right? And this might be one of the first budgets that actually has to deal with that reality of, hey, the gas kind of running out.
The gas ain't running out yet. So from my sources, the gas isn't running out just yet. And it'll be a while before the gas actually does run out. What the problem is, and it was interesting that last week I was in a UTT conference, and my mind was opened to a whole new world of academia in the UTT context. And often downplayed as a secondary university compared to UTT, University of the West Indies, but in fact might be more cutting edge. And I was privy to some projects that is being undertaken by professors and PhD students, and one of them is involved in measuring gas consumption and that sort of thing, right? And usage and all of that. Production versus consumption. From the understanding of the presentation, which I was really impressed by, all is not lost. And there are other projects that are being undertaken in the UTT environment that could very well benefit Trinidad and Tobago in the short, medium, and long term. How we consume gas and what we do with gas is important. And we have been signatories, as in Trinidad and Tobago, has been signatories to so many different agreements that is supposed to be shifting us to a greener economy.
Right.
That's not happening.
Yeah.
And so many different agreements that we have been, even under the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we are supposed to be moving towards greener energy. It's not like we don't have the infrastructure. It's not like we don't have the minds. We just don't have the political will. And it seems as though those in power seems fixated on small goals. So they're going to focus on environmental, focus on all the offshores, all of the investments, the progress that was made in Venezuela, and secure that as wins. But those wins should be wins that give us revenue generation, not cause us to have some level of consumption. We lack a level of innovation and creativity at the governance level, there's no doubt, right? But coming out of the mines, if we could depoliticize the UTT and see it for what it is, a worthy academic institution that has legitimate teaching mechanisms and mechanisms that I actually could align myself with because they're very practical and hands-on. It puts people in the field that with a level of experience. I was listening to a young engineer who is at the Ministry of Works, youngest engineer, civil engineer there. And his pride and joy was his work that he did out of his training from UTT on the Manzanilla Road.
Right.
And how they were able to balance between maintaining and sustaining the ecology of the Nariva Swamp, as well as sustaining the coastline, as well as ensuring that there is a thoroughfare that is not going to collapse in the next rainfall. And he was really proud of it. So good morning to him. But when I see young minds are given the opportunity to put forward their learnings in a practical manner and see something, completed as a project, it means that we're going somewhere. The problem is we need more of that. And therefore, there are also plans and projects coming out of the UTT that speaks to sustainability and, renewable energy and all of those things. The problem is that this government, under Colman Burt, has taken a rope and tied it around UTT's neck and took away their resources that they would need to even be better than University of the West Indies.
I mean, that seems to be a common narrative for any corner that gets government funding. Not enough. I mean, one of the overall or basic questions, far-reaching questions, and I might ask this again in the hour, right, as we get further in conversation, but one of the things that I am contemplating is, the prioritization of our resources now. And one of the initial thoughts that I have is, do we prioritize trying to maintain what we have, or sacrificing even more? Because everything has some degree of sacrifice. As you pointed out, UTT now has some degree of sacrifice. I didn't even know that. We sacrifice even more. We be as lean as possible so that we could be aggressive in choice areas that we might not even be considering now. Because that road project there, that's an infrastructure project. The benefits are long-term. Things like that. I mean, not that it's apples to apples comparison, but when you think about the New Deal and some of the benefits that it had in the short and long term, you're thinking, hey, if we need the economy to be kick-started, of course, concerns with inflation notwithstanding, where's the progress? Where's the development? Where's the not just the legacy project that will look nice, but we don't necessarily have a plan for it. And to some extent,
like the ANR International Airport.
I didn't say it this time. I didn't say it because also you could maybe look at Gates and its predecessor dollar for dollar. That was not necessarily because in principle, the airport is not necessarily a bad idea. Like at some point,
absolutely not.
Right? It's just that
There's no plan.
There's no plan for it. I don't even know how many airlines are going to be coming to it.
There are only 4 bridges.
So with
That's
that,
a massive structure of 4 stories.
so with that being said, like it's similar with Gate and with dollar for dollar. Like now things like UTT, that's one of the positive consequences. The capacity we have now for intellectual development and academia increased because we have Costa, UTT, we have other institutions, and they are provided not just academia jobs, but then of course more perspectives, more attempts at trying to get certain things developed or done or theorized or
Formalized, yeah.
Formalized. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I'm not academic enough. But like, is what I'm saying making sense? Because I know it's very unrealistic, but I do wonder if we needed to maybe have like, okay, what is the one area that we could really focus on? Maybe it's agriculture, maybe it's tourism, maybe it's manufacturing, you know?
Well, one of the things that the most underplayed thing, the most downplayed thing in UTT for as far as I'm concerned, which is something that we should blow up from a service industry, tourism industry, export industry, is the food technology program. And when you see the kind of things that they are inventing and coming up with from a food technology perspective, why are we not investing more?
And this is not just agriculture, but
no,
also
this is food
culinary,
production.
Food production, like different ways to...
Yes. Another one is in THDI and Tobago.
Yeah.
Which should be given the opportunity to bolster its output and its range and its capacity to hold students from across the region, as well as to graduate professionals that could go straight into the industry, not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but up the islands too.
Can it be, when you look at it, right? I know I'm going to touch on culture now, because one of the things that I lament on is the fact that sports and culture, these sorts of national icons, we kind of let them fall by the wayside too often, and as a result, the country has a harder time coming together, right? With regards to our national identity, I mean, to some degree, one could argue we have some of the best food in the world, right? We are an interesting tourist destination. We have a unique blend of cultural backgrounds that then shape what we have now. And yet, we literally do not have any marketable point of reference, including what's the national dish. When tourists come in, there are a whole host of things on the street food level that we could say, oh, bacon shark, doubles, and then maybe find a good kalu place and whatever. But like, there seems to be no advancement, there seems to be no organizing around, okay, we have a thing. We have many things. We have so many things.
And that's what I was about to tell you. I don't believe we could have one national dish, because there are so many national dishes that make up who we are. So for example, in one party or one house party that you and I could go to, you're going to have kalaloo, you're going to have macaroni pie, you're going to have pilau, you'll have curry duck, you might have bacon shark, you're going to have doubles. And wedding, for example, you have all the fancy food, the roti, the fried rice, all of that. When you're partying, where we have corn soup and doubles. So I'm saying all of this to say that you're making a good point. And the point is, all of these things that you're talking about that represent the good of Trinidad and Tobago is literally discounted by one thing. The fact that we could shoot a 4-year-old yesterday morning. The fact that we are crime-ridden. The fact that people, my neighbors, they have, visitors ever so often, Airbnbs, whatever. And, they come here so excited to experience Trinidad and Tobago and go to Maracas and go to here and go to there. And sometimes when I see them, sometimes on the corridor, when I see them, I say, listen, recently a group came from England, a whole group of Brits and Scots came to Trinidad for a wedding. And they were just excited by the fact that they were here. And they're coming back next year for Carnival. But I had to say to them, just be careful where you go. Stick to the main spots, and if you want a nightlife, stick to specific areas. Don't venture outside. Now, the powers that be would say, well, isn't that the same thing in New York and in Toronto and Miami? So my response to that is, even if it is, we're a small, minute metropolis. Minute. We're not big like that. Toronto and New York and Miami could more than disguise their crime rates. And it's probably located in some places where tourists wouldn't go. But we are not that lucky. So, we have so much to give. We have myopic minds in governance. Well, I wouldn't say governance, in government. And those minds are not prepared to think outside the box, and they are only prepared to focus on what they think is the right thing to do.
Well, just looking it up here, as of June, murders in New York were reduced from 170 the year before to 141. New York has a population of 8 million, and there we go, right? So let's not try to make those comparisons.
Can't.
But you brought up crime. One of the things that I found interesting was, and I think I kind of observed this a little bit last year. Crime is an issue, crime is an issue, crime is an issue. Then budget comes along. We see the budget. This chamber is happy with the budget. That chamber is happy with the budget. I kind of look at them and I'm like, y'all crazy or y'all lazy? I don't understand.
Or
but
dancing to a beat.
But my point is, and then crime is kind of forgotten. Because those who are happy with the budget kind of wave the happy flags, whatever colors they are, right? Their P&M flag or their Trinidad flag or whatever they try to couch it as with being happy with the budget. And I do wonder if to some extent there is this, it's not limited to this budget, but we'll say crime is an issue, but then things like the budget and election comes around and I just need to be taken care of economically. And then I'll kind of forget when it's time to put my mark next to which symbol about all of my complaints about crime because this politician maybe got me all of the grants and the hampers and the subsidies and whatever and got me the CPEP job or the ministry job or the special company job that I've been maybe actually going into the office 20 hours a week, if so much. For some people, that's a lot, right? Like, they forget all about the crime. They forget all about the fact that they had to bury an aunt or a cousin or a baby cousin. I mean, how great is that potential, you think, to continue? Because I think it's real. So let me couch it that way, unless you want to...
To continue for the country or continue for the government?
Well, that the people will basically look for election goodies in the budget. And
from what I've been looking at and from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, people are not looking forward to a budget that is going to give them goodies.
You're sure?
Yeah.
Because most people that understand that the goodies come with a price and they're not free tend to not be the vocal ones, except for maybe letters to the editor and talk shows.
There was something, specifically, the mood of the people, I looked at it when Terrence Yeltsin got robbed. And there was some, the other stations were asking people what they thought. And one person, specifically, someone who the PNM, may categorize because of her features as one of theirs, she said, well, it's about time it hit home and you'll know how it feels, right? Mm-hmm. So people are not empathetic or sympathetic to the fact that it happened to the Yeltsin. Especially when his comment, so my issue with that was when the minister, whoever the minister on the other side said, would you want me to get involved? So I posted on my social media, as it pertains to that conversation with DL saying about whether you want me to get involved. Isn't the Minister of National Security supposed to be involved in every single issue that arises as it pertains to crime? And was DL saying going to be afforded special treatment? And can we say that because his people were, his perpetrators were caught in less than 48 hours, he did?
Well, I am willing to say no to that part because I've seen other robberies
happen and
happen and they got the guys now for now.
My thing is, though,
I
not
think
everybody has the ability to pick up the phone and call a minister.
that is true. Although, to some extent, and some people wondered how he allowed himself to be videotaped like that.
He wanted himself to be videotaped.
And I find it very interesting that the message that was sent out was, I just wanted you to know. Like, it was almost like, I don't want to put words in his mouth, I don't want to get into trouble, but it was almost like if he was like, you happy now?
Yeah, it sounded like that. It sounded like
this
that.
way you reach, you happy now?
It sounded like that one. And then when he said, no, I don't want you to do anything, I was like, well, he did, and I don't give credit to DL Singh a lot because I see him as inconsequential. But in that instance, he would have expressed his frustration because that's his spot. After his constituency day,
yeah.
And give him that, he's always in his constituency at a specific day, at a specific time. That's his spot after, right? But you are in the cabinet. You have the opportunity, just like how I am sitting opposite to you, to say it to the minister in the presence of your colleagues, you're doing you know what.
Okay. Just to wrap this up quick before we welcome the next guest. First of all, one of my issues with Budget Day is the fact that a lot of our issues, yes, crime touches on a lot of areas, but I also would say the budget touches on a lot of areas. And that's obvious to say, except for the fact that the budget shortfall situation, I guess we could say is across the board, right? So on one hand, I will put that framework there for the Minister of National Security. There are some things he just can't do because there's no money. On the other hand, I could see where ministers like DL Singh might say, I have an issue and it's going to go in one ear and out the other, right? And it might not be the Minister of National Security. It could be
finance,
the cabinet consensus.
It could be the cabinet consensus.
It could be amongst those who are first amongst equals.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
And at the end of the day, if this was COVID, obviously you can't sideline him for that.
No.
Right? But when it's not a medical thing or a political thing, essentially I do wonder, right? I also, we don't know who's going to continue, who's going to retire, whatever. Are there any solid indicators on who is definitely going forward in the PNM slate?
There's some indication that there are a few that are...
Because I always thought that Minister DL Singh, he's probably ready to go.
Yeah.
He's like, I dealt with COVID. None of y'all dealt with COVID.
I done.
Right? Or your wretches, I'm too tired.
No, I think he's prepared. In that, a certain seniority in the structure of the government. Yeah.
I would say the party is more concerned about that than the government, because part of me is like, what do we need continuity for right now? What project do we have that continuity matters?
ANR International Airport.
It's not being done by a Chinese firm. Do we really need? I mean, I don't know if a new government could come in and just axe that at this stage.
They can't axe it.
I
wouldn't support that they axe it. But
at this point, that's kind of...
They can't axe it, but I would say that this is, every prime minister owns a project. So, for example, Manning owned the waterfront project. Yeah. Pandey owned Piarco International. Yeah. Kamla owned the Children's Hospital. Manning's, Rowley's owning ANR International. The ANR Robinson International Terminal.
Well, he might own it, rhetorically speaking, but depending on how it was financed,
it's a different story.
We might not necessarily own it in the long run. We might be paying royalties to welcome our own tourists to our own island. But with that said, we are out of time for this part of the segment. So when we come back, we'll welcome another guest to get more into the economics of the budget, into the dollars and cents of it all. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. Welcome back to Talking Mode, ladies and gentlemen. And to continue our pre-budget discussion, we have with us specialist consultant in competitiveness and sustainable development. I am speaking, of course, of Dr. Indira Sajawan. Good morning, Dr. Sajawan, via telephone. Glad you could join us.
Good morning. Can you hear me very well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
So, Dr. Sajawan, I'm joined by Dr. Sheikh Mohammed, and the first thing I want to ask you, though, to get the conversation rolling is with this budget. Essentially, in my opinion, the last budget was very similar, maybe even a carbon copy to some extent to the budget the previous year. Should we more or less expect more of the same moving forward with this new budget?
Well, the one difference with this budget is that it's a budget just before a national election. And obviously, as has been tradition, any government that is in office reading a last budget uses it as a major financing tool for the election campaign. And by that, I mean what we would probably see is a heavier focus on things like monies allocated to local government, community development, the National Infrastructure Agency. These organizations, so the building of roads, fixing of potholes, we will suddenly see a proliferation of these kinds of projects, and therefore the budget will speak to the financing for these things, because this is what gives people a sense that, economic activity is happening, money is being put in my pocket, this government is working for me, and therefore I should vote for it. So America would have to happen for this budget to deviate from that pattern, in my view.
Well, given the fact that we basically should be expecting a deficit, I believe that's what the consensus is. Well, just a deficit. This budget will be in a deficit. Will we potentially see other areas neglected to the point where it might become bigger issues than they have been in the last year or before?
Absolutely. I mean, the bigger issues would happen even if we had a belt-tightening budget, because the reality that this country faces right now is that over the 9 years, and we have to speak to this administration because it has been in power for the last 9 years, we have seen what we have seen over that period of time, except for the blip that we had because of the Ukraine-Russian war, which resulted in us getting increased revenue for either the same or selling a less amount of natural gas and petrochemicals, because the prices on the international market shot up significantly, and therefore we had a largesse coming into the coffers. Over this 9-year period, we have seen continuously the decline of the particularly the energy sector. The IMF, I mean, you don't have to quote Dr. Sajuan. You just have to go to the IMF. The IMF speaks to the fact that 2023 broke a 10-year cycle of negative growth in Trinidad and Tobago, and in 2023 we had a small positive growth, and they had an expectation that it would continue into 2024. However, 2024 has already shown us that it's more likely than not going to be worse than 2023, because the energy sector declined in 2023 by about 13%, and in the mid-year review already the contraction was larger than in the similar period in 2023. And there's nothing that has happened. In fact, the prices of all of these commodities have gone down. They're less than was budgeted for, and production has fallen short of what was expected. And the sad thing is that over this entire 9-year period, this administration continued to put all of its emphasis on the energy sector and failed to focus on other sectors that have significant potential for generating foreign exchange, generating revenues, creating jobs, etc. We seem to have this love affair with energy, totally, ignorant to what is happening in the world with respect to how energy transformation is taking place and how it must take place because of the challenges of climate change. I mean, have you been feeling the heat that we have been experiencing? These things are real. A national budget in today's world is supposed to contextualize development. How are you using the resources to develop this a country in the context of climate risk? Because climate risk means if there are worse floods, it means government has to allocate more and more money to persons who are affected by flooding, to rebuilding infrastructure. If there's a hurricane, similarly, and more we are seeing these things happening, and therefore your budget has to take these things into consideration. It's affecting agriculture. The crops are totally confused in terms of when they should be flowering, when they should be bearing. We're seeing it impacting on the cocoa industry, on the coconut industry, and all of our agricultural-based industry. There are countries in the world, including the United States, that are providing incentives through its national budget to persons involved in agriculture to engage in practices that are going to shore up this sector and allow it to be able to function in the context of climate change. I mean, I could speak so much more to this question that you have asked, or you've just asked me, but I don't want to monopolize. I just don't want to speak. Yeah. Maybe you have another question.
Well, I do have a direct follow-up to that, and you may have already started to answer it, because traditionally we always said, well, the oil and gas will hold us. At the very least, we still need it in the short run, even though we acknowledge we have to diversify for the long run, right? Because it will run out eventually. But right now, we have to wait at least 2 to 3, maybe 4 years to get new natural gas supply, to keep the industry going, to get it back up to where it needs to be. Dare I ask that we might actually need to start diversification to get us through the short term, because the oil and gas project's not going to come online soon enough. We're going to have a couple of deficit budgets like we might not have seen since, what, the 70s or 80s?
So listen, I don't think we'll ever get back to there, okay? Even with the Dragon field, if it does come, you're right. If we're able to work out a deal with the Dragon, with Venezuela, that is, and we know that that is filled with a set of issues outside of our control. If we are able to get that deal, we won't be seeing gas until about 2028 or thereafter. So what happens in the meantime? As it is the industries that require, petrochemical industry that requires natural gas, the LNG sectors, they are operating below capacity. We know Train 1 was shut down, etc. So that I am on record and repeatedly saying that we must put all our efforts into trying to increase gas exploration, to maintaining this sector, because it will continue certainly for the next 10 to 15 years, although that could change because the dynamics of the world are changing so rapidly. You have a situation where Europe, for example, is putting in an import tax on any good or service that is produced using fossil fuel. So that it means that any country that is using our natural gas or any of the derivatives of a fossil fuel to produce an item to sell into Europe is going to face an additional tax, which makes them a little bit less competitive. These are some of the realities that are taking place in the world, and we have to be cognizant of it. That said, we must continue to put all our effort to monetize our natural gas as best as we can. However, the issue of diversification outside of oil and gas is an imperative, and it has been an imperative for well over 30 years, but unfortunately, even that, there's no quick fix. We can't fix that. We can't have that happening in 3 years. This government should have started it 9 years ago. If they had started it 9 years ago, it takes an average 10 years for any new industry that you start to go through its teething problems and be on a roadway to sustainability. And you are talking about the next 2 to 3 years. But we have to start. So having said all of that, we have to get it started. And there are some no-brainers that we could focus on. Tourism is one of them. But even tourism, I want to say to you, because of the challenge of climate change, soon this region's advantage with respect to sand and sea might not be an advantage anymore because the heat of the sun is so much. People are not going to want to go out there. The issue with respect to rising sea levels means that we could potentially lose a lot of our beaches. So we have to start to rethink and recraft a tourism product that takes into consideration the issue of climate risk going forward. So that's another. That is one, but we need to do it. Agriculture, food security is going to continue to be an imperative. Every budget of this administration has speak to the importance of food production and food security. We suffered through COVID. We suffered through the Ukraine-Russian war because we're so dependent on imported food. Inflation hit record highs. But yet we are doing very little to support the agricultural industry in Trinidad and Tobago. The national budget generally gives the agricultural sector about $750 million. Out of that, 90% goes to recurrent expenditure. You're talking about having about $75 million to do anything meaningful in terms of development. No wonder it continues to languish. And we're really not serious about agriculture. There was a recent appointment of some kind of commission that has to do with agriculture, not one farmer on it, not one farmer organization on it. I mean, are we really serious? We're not serious, that's the bottom line.
Well, with regards to agriculture, I find this somewhat interesting, and maybe you know better than me. But given the fact that we have food security issues, that we saw food inflation because our import partners had food inflation, I would have thought that the private sector might have maybe seen an opportunity to have a major investment and not just continue to spend foreign exchange to import something to sell us down here. Do you have any idea why we're not necessarily seeing larger commercial activity in the agricultural sector than we've already seen? Because to me, it doesn't seem like there's much. Yes, we have farmers, but where are like the large-scale conglomerates saying we are going to be food manufacturers?
Well, why should a large-scale conglomerate do that when basically the model of conglomerates by distribution has served them so well? The non-energy sector grew in 2023. What are the elements within there that grew at the fastest rate? Trade and repairs, the retail sector. We're really, really good at buying from the rest of the world and selling it, and we're really good at giving PhDs to those who are really good at using our foreign exchange and spending it. And national awards as well, right? We're really good at doing that. But when it comes to calling them to account in terms of taking a real risk, take a real risk. Don't just import vehicles, and don't just import finished food, etc. Look towards using what we have and add value. There is very little of that happening. There are little pockets of it. I know Blue Waters, for example, attempted to create to develop a cocoa estate, and I think the idea was to bottle the coconut water. But the coconut industry is is suffering so badly from disease that I don't think that was successful. I know they're growing guavas and what's it called, some of the new superfruits, the new fruit on the market that goes like out of a cactus. The name slips me in this moment. I know that they're doing honey, for example. So there are little pockets. Hadco, for example, has made an investment into domestic tourism. But again, we don't know the terms and conditions under which Hadco was able to procure the Azerite Center. We don't know what kind of deals happened between, and I'm not saying it did, okay? So please, I'm saying potentially there was no transparency, and all we all know is suddenly one morning we wake up and we heard that Hadco now was the proud owner of the Azerite facility. They've also acquired another property. Yes, exactly. So there is effort, some amount of little pockets, but like you're saying, it's just too little. It's just too little. We need it on a much, much larger scale. We need to see partnerships between the producers, the producers of the raw materials, the farmers, that is, and the conglomerate sector that knows how to do business, that can get into the agro-processing. But it must be done in a way where it's win-win, where the farmers are not just doing all the grunt work and you're buying their produce for cents on the dollar, but it must be a partnership where the farmers can improve their quality of lives as well, because they are being paid a fair wage. So there's so much work that needs to be done in this economy, and the thing about it is we have the intellectual capacity to do it. It's simply that element of society is simply not used. It's simply what's the word? The doors are closed on their faces when it comes to contributing to the real development of this country. And instead, we see square pegs being placed around holes, collecting nice salaries, and we're going nowhere very, very quickly. I mean, look at the major variables, right? So we have basically not had any positive growth in this economy, except for last year, a small something. So growth is the thing. GDP, and what people may not understand, gross domestic product is the value of output, is the value of goods and services that an economy produces on a yearly basis. And basically, that has not been growing. And you want that to grow, and for that to grow, you have to bring on new sectors, you have to grow your existing sectors so that they could be producing more and more. If they're producing more and more, they could then generate more and more employment, sustainable employment. That's not happening. We have so many young professionals, coming out of university and cannot find jobs.
Correct.
People coming out of high schools cannot find jobs. These are some of the realities. We haven't even talked crime, which we probably need an entire time to speak, because that's impacting everything under the sun.
Well, I want to go back because you brought up our interesting use of Forex and the consensus by the private sector on how it's utilized. And I do have to ask, because we saw the government do it this year. They got a foreign loan, and I mean, to some extent, it was able to both give them foreign exchange to put into the system, as well as to help finance our deficits, their expenditure in local TT dollars. Okay, all well and good. But to what extent do you and your colleagues have concerns that this strategy might now be overused in the next couple of years, when it seems as though with GDP not really having anything to drive it to any significant growth, what's going to finance the deficits? That's on the books. There are also things, shortfalls of expenditure that isn't on the books. But to finance the deficit, are there any concerns that they're going to overuse foreign debt measures or implements? And we may end up in 10, 15 years to have a lot of debt to try to pay off and no way to do it because it's going to be in foreign exchange.
So what I know this government keeps doing, it keeps pushing the debt into the future. Now, currently, our debt situation is such that it requires at least 30% of our national budget to service the debt. It doesn't mean a government is using 30% of the budget to pay debt, okay? It simply means that would be addressing the issue of servicing all the debt that it would have to allocate 30% of the national budget to it. It's not doing that. What I have noticed the government is doing is simply rescheduling debt. So you issue a bond for 5 years, and before it rolls over, you are inviting persons to then roll it over for another 2. So it means all you're doing is you're pushing the repayment of that instrument into the future. See, you keep rolling it over, and it allows you to have access to the money. So that's one thing that the government is doing. But you are right, it's going to come to a head unless the growth trajectory of this economy is changed significantly in a positive direction. That is going to come back and bite it's going to come back and bite the citizenry. The other thing that the government is doing is it's using taxation as its means of financing its expenditure. So, it's really, really aggressively going after everyone. Those of us who pay tax should be paying more, and those of us who have not been paying tax should pay. That is the modus and the strategy of the government. This is why the revenue authority is so important to this government. The issue of property tax, and this is why the minister didn't do the sensible and responsible thing of extending the date by which we should pay a lot earlier than we still don't know what the extension is, although he said he's going to extend it. He didn't do it because he wants to be able to show as much revenue from property tax as he can in this fiscal year. So when he reads his budget, he will be in a position to say to us, well, you see, just like when I removed the subsidy on gas and nobody riot, I introduced the property tax on a flawed system, and people were just lining up to pay it. And, it's unfortunate because the only reason people are lining up to repay it is because of the penalty that you put in place.
Correct.
The day after, if I don't pay it by the 30th, the next day the penalty is so high, people barely have money. They don't have the money to pay the property tax. So the fear of having to pay that additional penalty, the potential of losing their homes, mean they have to find a way to find it, right? We already put on notice for increased water rate, increased electricity. I imagine he will not say much about that in this budget because it's pre-election.
Yes.
But it's going to come. It is going to come. A short night will turn in today. It's going to come. The issue of cutting subsidies to things like CDAP and it's going to come. The minister has already said that his capacity to fund it is less and less, and obviously your capacity must be less and less when the only place you want to get revenue from outside of taxes is oil and gas is declining. And you're doing nothing in order to support the growth of any other major sector. There's so many no-brainers. I'm tired of speaking about them. The yachting industry is one of them.
Yeah.
But we're not doing what we need to do in order to allow it to generate foreign exchange, increase the number of boats coming in, and then, of course, there is crime. And the way it affects everything.
The property tax deadline was extended to November 29th. I think that came out maybe the middle of the week.
Monday.
Oh, Monday. Any concern that extension to November 29th just still won't be practically enough for the population?
I don't think so.
Well, I mean, we have to wait and see. So we're in the end of September. We have all of October. Did you say the end of November?
Yeah, basically.
I imagine we'll have a similar situation coming towards the end because there are a lot of people who have not even received the devaluation, much less receiving from Inland Revenue the statement to pay. So there is that. I mean, the government is very easy on itself, and it's very quick to give itself extension for its inefficiencies. We saw that with the issuing of valuation, and we saw them do that without blinking. They give themselves extensions, but this country continues to be squeezed
Yes.
continues to be treated, with callousness, and that is not what a government is supposed to be doing.
Well, Dr. Sajuan, I do have to ask, because to some extent, one of the things I wonder is, why is it the population is so tolerant of these things? Because a lot of people know a lot of things and complain about a lot of things, but then it seems as though at the end of the day we accept it. Is it that too many citizens, they're looking at the short-term benefits of all of these programs, and could it be that now we've reached the point where the government does have to make some cuts? It might actually kind of show people, listen, this is the price of being short-sighted?
Well, I have an answer for that. By our nature, we're not a people who take to the street. We're not a people who go out there. We're real good at social media. We're really good at backseat criticizing and having all the answers and talking about what needs to be done and calling out other people to act on our. I'm so on social media and I see so many times people call me out, Dr. Sajuan, you need to get back there, you need to get back in the politics and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so I will get in. I will announce I'm back into the politics. And when I turn around, there will be, right? Because people are not willing to step out for themselves. So that's one reason, I think. We're not like that. And I think by and large, we are not like that because we're really basically powerless, Except for the one time we vote every 5 years, or when we vote in a local government election, we are people that's powerless. And I say that because our constitution makes us powerless. A constitution that is supposed to the rights of the people has really taken away our rights. Because basically, once we put power in the hands of you, we have no power to do anything. They could then do whatever they want. They could ramage from now until the cows come home. We are powerless. And all of these sessions that constitutional having over and over and over comes to naught because it's really not in the interest of those who hold power to change the constitution, because the constitution protects their power and keeps us powerless.
Correct.
There was a crime symposium this weekend. It was held by Project 600, and it was held at the TML. There were empty seats in there. I mean, it was a decent turnout, I have to say, and I want to commend Project 600. I want to commend the young people who have decided that, we are stepping forward. But again, when you look behind them, the numbers is just too few, even though we're all suffering. And so this crime symposium, the numbers and they advertised it. It was well advertised. I saw it being advertised on social media as I turned up. What happened to everybody else? Where were the people of this country who are the victims of crime? Why weren't we all there? That entire car park should have been flowing over with people, and it wasn't. So to come back to our powerlessness, right? Something as simple as the right to referendum we don't have in this country. And that is the one thing, if we were to have, you would see how the dynamic of the people could change in this country. Because it means that if sufficient number of us as defined, sign a petition so we want a change and the change must take place. We don't have that. So we want a right to recall. If an MP or a minister is not functioning well, we want that right. But there is no mechanism for us to have that. We could talk how much we want on social media. It simply will not happen in the current dispensation. We could want fixed term for any prime minister, and we do want that. And in fact, Joel has on any political party, force political parties to engage in succession planning and allow younger people to have the opportunity and to have the ambition to want to sit in your seats and have a legitimacy to do that. We would break this notion that people have that I should be the leader of my political party or the prime minister, into my 80s, 90s. But we have no means of, we could shout it from the mountaintop. We do. If we had the right to referendum, then we could have that.
Yes.
But nobody's intent on giving us that. And we have had occasions where two governments campaigned on constitutional reform and did nothing when they were in power. And in our case in point, the PP government. And both of them had these special majorities in the parliament that could have or should have given us these rights. And it's real, it did not do so.
Well, Dr. Sajuan, as we're coming to a close, I'd just like to ask if you have any closing thoughts on this upcoming budget. What would you want to tell the population that they should be looking out for or be prepared for, or maybe even go so far as to hope for?
But you know what? You know, I have become a little bit cynical about all this budget process, all this hype we put around the budget, honestly. Because it is the same conversation we have every year around budget time. And I call for accountability in terms of how the last year's money was spent. We don't get that. We will not get it again. We are for how has things changed, has it changed? You know, how have you made things better for the citizenry? None of that. Governments use the budget tool to their own convenience. They allocate the money how they feel like, and that's going to happen. You know, there's really not going to be anything significantly different. I have been calling for economic diversification for so long that I am exhausted.
Yeah.
And it has not happened. I am left paralyzed in terms of what else there is to do in order to bring about change without power. And I therefore will listen to the budget. I will comment on the budget. But I have no great hope that this is going to be anything outside of an election budget to convince a citizenry at a certain level, because really the core base that political parties just have an interest in speaking to, and they will do what they need to do in order to make that happen, and the rest of us will sit on the fence or sit by and look at it, shake our heads and say, gosh, where are we going as a country? Or people will make arrangements to leave the country and go and live elsewhere where they feel safer, where they can have the best of opportunities, but they will prefer to do that at the state is with so much potential doing what we need to do in order to transform it.
Well, Dr. Sajuan, thank you for joining me once again. I could imagine there's a lot of demands on your time right now, of course. I think did we lose Dr. Sajuan? Well, folks, thanks to Dr. Sajuan. With that said, I want to take a break. When we come back, I'll continue my conversations with Dr. Mohammed, and we will open up the phone line. Stay tuned.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
let's go to the last part.
I'm back here on Talking Point on WSN, the Contact Capital Show. Michael Small. Still have Dr. Shane Mohammed with me. Of course, we just had Dr. Indira Sajiwan basically hitting us with a set of inconvenient truths. If we don't necessarily want what she had to say, we don't like it, that's unfortunate for those who don't. I, on the other hand, very much appreciate her insights, and I literally cannot disagree with anything she said, period. Right? I completely agree with just about everything she said. I can't think of anything where I would disagree with. And it doesn't paint a pretty picture, and that's our reality, folks. And if we want to put our heads in the sand and try to ignore it and shelve it, as Sule Joseph would say, well, we'll pay for that. Just wait. With that said, we open the phone lines. You could call in and have your say last chance for the week. But with that said, I do have something that I want to ask Dr. Mohammed, because one of the points that Dr. Sajiwan made at the end there was that we need to have more power in the voters. But of course, democracy has this interesting catch-22. Voters tend to not be really good with regards to treating the responsibility of democracy the way that it should, right? They don't necessarily have the engagement to know everything that's going on well enough to have an informed opinion to then make a correct assessment of this is what we're voting for, this is what we're not voting for, or what we're voting against. But I would argue this, and part of that I think is with regards to leadership, because I think both here and abroad, I find that the leadership, and it's not just the politicians, it could be community leaders, activist groups, whatever, they try to simplify things to catchphrases. They try to simplify things to emotional appeals that are easy to go viral, to circulate, because it's not too long. You know the slogans, you know? A campaign slogan. Why? Because it appeals to you, it's quick, it's easy to remember, not a lot of depth to it, except if you emotionally have attachment to it, you will ascribe depth that may or may not be realized by the politician if they get elected or not. But maybe if we do give more power to the people, maybe if we give the mistake is that they don't have enough power, that's why they're not engaged. And if we do give them more power, maybe it will force leaders to come up and encourage and lead and inform and impart knowledge and encourage engagement and maybe even demand and force engagement.
Well, Dr. Sajiwan said it right. I have always said that, yes, we should have the right to, we should have the opportunity for referendum. And the referendum should be able to give us the opportunity to decide what we want in terms of the critical matters that touch and concern the country. But as it pertains to communication and how we engage with the population, we don't have to look far. Mia Motley does it on a weekly basis. And she goes in an in-depth conversation that captures the minds of the listener, and she's able to explain herself in a way where top to bottom understands. But we don't have that here.
But not just the fact that it's a weekly basis.
It's a weekly basis.
Because I think there's supposed to be weekly things.
There's supposed to be something called post-cabinet weekly briefing. Weekly, where every minute, and the purpose for that is when major decisions are made on specific portfolios, those ministers come, they share the information, they gather, they get questions. But what has been happening is that we've had a prime minister for 9 years that any question he seems challenged by, or he speaks down to journalists. And
not just that, he more or less
dismisses them.
It's mostly a one-man, maybe a two-people show
Yeah,
at these briefings.
exactly. And it's supposed to be, to give credit to Mrs. Prasad Bissessa, her cabinet briefings used to have everybody who was pertinent to decisions made, and questions were asked. There were not questions that were not asked and she didn't answer.
I just wish she would have continued that momentum as opposition leader and make herself more available to questions.
Agreed.
Now, we do have a call on the line. Sorry, that's been waiting. Good morning, caller. You on the air?
Good morning, Sean.
Sorry, Mr. San Fernando. I'm so sorry.
Good, no problem. Good morning, Dr. Mohammed.
Good morning. How are you?
Just looking at your fashion statement this morning. You're looking good.
It's been a while since. Anyway.
You know, Sean, this, and I didn't want to speak about the budget. Dr. Sajwan Ali, just what he talked about is what I was calling to speak about. The powerlessness of the citizenry with the talk of referendum and our voting power, and I think this is where I keep telling you this, Sean. This is where we have to send a message. The message, because it is not only the who. When you look at what we have coming up in the next general election. Is there any good side to the sides? Is there any good side? And I think this is where, and I am saying this again on the program, Sean.
Yes, I know.
The only way to send this message, the only way to send this, you do not go to vote. Go out and vote and spoil the ballot.
No.
And if it is, hold on, Dr. Mohammed, listen to me. And if it is,
no.
20%, if it is that you have 20% of spoiled ballots, which the EBC will have to publicize, then there will be a message, because the population is so fed up that people are not going to go out to vote. You know, people are not going to go out to vote. So you have to incentivize and make your vote count. Make it count. Make that stamp count, even if it doesn't go, isn't cast for anyone, but make it count. And that is the point. Because what else can we do, Dr. Mohammed? I will stop here. You tell me what else we can do. Have a good day.
Let me just couch what he says. I agree from the point of view that it's better than not voting. I think so. And I think...
I wouldn't say...
Hold on. And at the very least, it's make it be counted.
Yes.
Because you are sending an active message. You're not just, oh, I'll stay away. Because it seems as though politicians, okay, you stay away. I'm still getting voted in. I don't care about you. Right? But to some extent, I would hope that one side or the other would realize the untapped potential. If 20 to 30% of the population said, well, to hell with both of you.
Well, the thing about it is this. This is, I am saying this, I've been continue saying this, I will say this, I'm repeating myself over and over, but this is a watershed moment. We've reached a crossroads in our politics.
Right,
and
yes.
if we don't get it, if we don't make a decision as to who takes the reins, and not just take the reins by default, but who takes the reins based on credibility, and who takes the reins based on the ability of the caliber of the candidates that are selected, then by all means you can spoil your ballot. But if there's a true competition, and I anticipate there's going to be a true competition. I will not speak from a place of not knowing.
I mean, I can't see it yet.
But it's not going to, it's too early. You see,
I get
it's too early,
okay.
Right? I mean, we just given...
So what is the latest the election could be? 3 months from August next year?
Yes,
is that it? So
yes.
we could go into November next year?
We could go...
So it literally could be a year away still?
It could. It could.
Right?
It could be as early as December.
But I actually don't really think it's going to be early, right?
Right. There are people who believe that there's a concept that it could be as early as December. It can be as mid-year, it could be May, or it could go all the way to the end, right? It all depends on what the money looks like, right? It all depends.
That is true, yes. I have to take that back. If the budget is really bad.
What the money looks like, there are key delivery projects that they want to own and that Keith Rowley wants his name on. Take, for example, the airport in Tobago.
They're going to change the name of the airport?
They're going to put, when he opens it, he's going to put a plaque.
Well, yeah, okay,
right?
yeah.
So those things that we don't see value in, these politicians see the need for their name to go on something to say that I did X, Y, and Z.
Okay, stick a pin in that. We have, I think, Kuva on the line. Good morning, caller. You on there? Mova on the line, sorry. Good morning, caller. You on there? I didn't hear properly. My bad.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
Dr. Mohammed.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm listening to the conversation about what voters should or shouldn't do. I am 71 years old. I have been observing politics since I was a young boy. I used to buy newspapers. When I started to work in 1972, I started buying papers. I have looked at the PNM all my life. I've never, ever voted for the PNM. The PNM is the same PNM today as it was yesterday. The PNM's problem today is that they just don't have money. The only time the PNM seems to be governing properly is when they have money to spend. The PNM has always been void of any new innovative ideas.
You're right.
People, I heard someone say just now, Mrs. Sajuan, she said, no, Dr. Mohammed, you said so. You said that innovation is lacking. There was a certain gentleman that used to be on radio and TV, and he always used to say that the PNM hasn't had an idea in 40 years. It's now 60 years. Why people keep, and I have told Sean before, Sean, it is unfair the way we keep putting the two as the same. They can never be the same. You have one that has held political office for 50 years. They have yet to get it right. Why are we blaming Kamala? Why are we acting as if Kamala was in office for 40 or 30 years? Kamala has only been in office for 5 years. The UNC, the opposition combined, has only held office for 17 and a half years. We should never. It is unfair. It is erroneous to keep saying that they are the same. They cannot be the same, and we will go nowhere. We can talk it. We can go into all kind of analyses. The PNM will always be the PNM, void of ideas, only able to govern when they have money. And you can do what, I don't know what it will take for Canadians to wake up and understand. We have to get rid, and I am not pushing a UNC area. I want to make that clear. But we will go nowhere if we don't get rid of the PNM. I get angry when I hear people having these discussions of what you think about budget and what you think. I listen to budget, well, not the whole thing. But budgets are irrelevant and trying to be one. No, I've listened to budgets for a couple of years. And what have we gotten? All talk and talk and talk. And nothing has changed. The PNM is about taxing you. They are about, when they have money, spend it crazy. You know, they have no money now. And then again, look at what Common Good just did to the citizens, which is something that this is arrogant. You made the citizens fools, had them rushing to pay this thing, knowing well you just wanted money for that 70. I knew that. I'm not brilliant. I knew that from the beginning. And I told people that. I say I didn't get my valuation yet. And I'm not taking it on because the lines come. If I don't get my valuation, I can't do nothing. I mean, doesn't the population feel insulted? What is it going to take us? We have to get rid of these people, you know, that we're hoping. It's not going to change. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. I will say this. You could make a case of wanting to move on from the PNM as a country and still criticize the UNC, because to me, I wouldn't necessarily say the Keith Rowley administration is exactly the same as all of the iterations of Patrick Manning's administrations, as was Eric Williams, and so on, right? Basil Pandey's time is not the same as Kamala Pisasa's. Is 4 or 5 years enough to judge a slate of politicians?
Well, it seems as though, and I'll to be as objective as possible, it seems as though that the country believes that 5 years is enough to judge a population, and that our country, so for example, I spent a lot of yesterday, just to use yesterday as an example, a lot of yesterday telling people that they need to mind their business, more or less, right?
Right, yeah.
And we fail to realize that given all of the ills, no, you're not going to get a pristine government. You're not going to get a government that is absolutely 100% perfect. You're lucky if you get it at 75% optimum, right? The fact of the matter is, the caller is making a good point, that under Mrs. Prasad Bissessar, she focused on education, she focused on social services, she focused on healthcare, and she tried her best with national security. Did it suffice? It didn't. Why? Because there were elements of mismanagement, there were elements of expenditure that people felt that it was exorbitant and that sort of thing. We're not denying that fact. But the point is, does that mean that she's completely obliterated from being able to try again? No. Mr. Pandey tried and tried until he succeeded.
Yeah.
And Mr. Manning tried and failed and tried and he tried and failed. Then he won again, and then he won again, and then he failed. The point is, we have gotten to the point where we are in the rhetoric of a lot of people. There are a lot of people speaking, and they're speaking from a place of not understanding governance, and they're not understanding how government works. And you can have, as we have seen in this country, you can have $12 a barrel of oil, $9 a barrel of oil. It's how, and Indira said it, it is how innovative you are to make two ends meet with doing, and quoting both Manning and Pandey, taking a little and doing a lot.
And I hate to say this though, but we don't necessarily have a track record of that across the board.
No.
I feel as though our politics, whatever party they are, they kind of tend to go towards the standard deviation, if that's the correct usage phrase, or the mean, right? To go towards the average. We do have a caller though, from Tobago. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah.
Morning, caller, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. I'm calling from Tobago.
Good morning.
And good show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I want to say that I am 72 years of age, 1 year older than the last caller. He said he was 71. And I want to let you all know that Tobago will be won by the TPP.
Yes.
PNM is not going to win the 2 seats in Tobago.
He's absolutely right.
We consider in Tobago the PNM to be evil and wicked. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, caller. I mean, listen, if there's one forecast that I have learned to pay attention to, it is when Tobago say who they're going to vote for, right?
They're going to vote for them.
Because they were like, yeah, we voted the PNM out. And I was like, because I was in Crown Point at the time, so I was like, it was one thing if I was, in Black Rock or something, and somebody said that. But the next thing if someone in Crown Point says, I'm like, you sure? But then...
I walked into a TV station.
It almost was 16-0.
I walked into the TV station, and the head of news was sitting there waiting for me, and she said, what's the prediction? I said, 15-0. And she was like, she looked at me like, what?
Right, 15, yeah.
I said, it's 15-0. I said, they may end up with 1, but 15-0. And the initial number was 15-0, right? But the thing is, Tobago has made their decision, and no matter what the PNM tries to do, it is not going to shift that. And Tobago is very comfortable where they are. And after all, it's not been 5 years yet.
I would dare to say this. I don't think there's enough reason right now
for them to change their minds.
To change their minds. As much as there are still things that I would like answers for, like that, or like in a perfect world, that audio gate situation would have ended careers. But we live in a different time where I guess we just have to.
I'll tell you this. I'll be real. The audio gate was simply something that was absolute mischievous. And whoever was in the room, the onus was on those persons who are the political actors to ensure that they sanitize the room to be able to have a conversation of that level.
You see, but I just dislike the content as well.
Conversation,
right?
however, is not strange to any other political party.
I know that, but therein lies my point, that, even the new kids on the block.
Well, the new kids on the block, remember one man said politics has a morality of its own.
I know.
And that the new kids on the block will also have to find mechanisms and ways not to cheat the system and not to fire others, but to ensure that there's an equity across the board, because for 20 years there was none.
I'll say this, they came close. We don't know to what extent it would have been cheating the system, because obviously we're assuming details, we're inferring details based on what was said. It's not the full picture, right? Listen, at the end of the day, I'm willing to kind of sideline it.
Yeah.
Just
It's
based
not
on,
relevant
look,
right now.
just based on what is needed right now. Because I'll be frank, one of the few tangible pieces of hope I have for this upcoming election is the fact that, and I don't know who they're going to ally themselves with, or if they will ally themselves with everybody, but I actually do hope that the TPP wins the 2 seats.
They will.
Right? And not being incumbent to either party gives us room for something positive. Right?
There's that narrative as well.
Let's put it that way, right? Because if they were married to either party, right? Obviously, if they were married to the PNM, that's very obvious. But even if they were officially aligned with UNC now, I would say, no, wait, hold off. But if they're not, all of a sudden, they have room to maneuver.
They're not.
And we have, as a population, room to say, well, we want improvement.
Give
us the best shot.
There's no inkling of yellow in that mix of blue.
Yeah.
And that they are very happy and very confident into with regard to what they're doing.
So a point that I wanted to make before the caller brought it up and reminded me about the TPPs, most likely they're gonna get 1 to 2 seats, most likely 2, but we'll say at least 1,
2.
Right? I don't like to speak in absolutes, all right? But I'll say this, my thing is with this election, unless we get like a clear-cut candidate, like this is the person to get us over whatever challenge we're gonna face in the next 5 years, I would actually hazard a guess, as much as I look at Europe and some of the European countries and say, whew, their democracies could be quite a mess. I think what we need to shake things up is a multi-party parliament, not just 2, right? Maybe more than 3, to kind of force the issue. Because if we just have 2...
Sean, we're not politically mature there.
Yes, but here's the problem. If we just have 2, whether it is official or not, it's almost as though the 2 parties currently in parliament are like there's an unofficial, unspoken
in the 2025
cartel,
period, they're going to have 3.
Right? Because right now, think about it. If I lose, what's going to happen? I'm going to be opposition leader. We're going to get a salary, and we could just spend our time criticizing them while we just sit back and relax.
That is not so that I'll sit back and be opposition leader is not an option for the opposition leader right now. She has a host of burdens and a host of expectations.
But that's mainly in her party.
No, across the board in the country. So the country asks a lot of questions about what the opposition is doing. The caller from over made the point about beating up on the UNC. The reason why the country is asking about what the UNC is doing is because they're the alternative.
Yeah.
And there's an expectation that they are going to raise the bar to be better than the PNM in the next election.
In fact, I would argue when you have an incumbent that's had 2 terms already, the opposition is almost by default the government in waiting.
Correct.
Right? And the fact that we can't necessarily say that about them 100% is an issue.
That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing.
Okay, fair enough. I see where you're going there. We have St. Joseph on the line. Good morning, caller. You on here? Caller, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, caller. You on here?
Hello?
Yes, you're on here. Don't listen to the TV. Listen to your phone.
I listen to my phone.
Yeah. Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're on the air.
Okay. I have been listening to your... Hello? Are you hearing me?
Yes.
And I think the whole thing about this program,
mute your TV, caller.
Program. I think we're going the wrong way. What we have to do is embarrass this government. We have to embarrass this government. I don't know if you all have the balls to do it. We have to pick up things like, we have to think like what we are doing, what they're doing, and what is wrong. I want to start thinking of comparing Singapore with us. If you're brave enough to look at Singapore against us.
Mm-hmm.
We have a what we're looking at, for instance, the social problem we have. these Singapore people came and told them exactly what was wrong, and they refused to change it. And everything they refused to change, we have to make sure they understand what is wrong and how they're running a government. Everything they're doing is wrong. They're running wrong. But I think we're supposed to have a debate too. We started looking at debates. We're supposed to try and have some debates. Look at these people. I think I saw where the guy who challenged Griffith for the debate, was it Alexander?
Yeah.
And why can't we approach them? Let's start something. Alexander was challenged for the debate. Why can't we do that?
Yeah.
There's a number of things we could do, but stay away from the yellow one thing. Start looking at countries that are doing well. Estonia, all better than us. We are not looking at other countries that are doing well, with no money, no gas.
All right, caller. Thank
Okay.
you.
There's an issue there.
With Singapore?
No, not only with Singapore, with European countries. European countries have taken, they are way ahead of the rest of the world as it pertains to going green and their whole idea of innovation and sustainability. Take Finland, for example, Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark. They are eons away, they are centuries ahead of us, right? Decades, ahead of us. There are elements of their system that we can adopt. We just can't take it and just fit it into Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, wholesale.
Can't do that. There's beyond the Singapore model. I studied the Malaysian model. And the Malaysian model spoke to how we weeded out, how they weeded out endemic corruption in their public service in order to get it to a place of efficiency and effectiveness, so that they didn't have to pay, like some people and some jurisdictions, they pay for passport or they pay for a driver's permit.
Because essentially you have to grease the wheels to
right.
get what is
So
what
they
should
recognize
be
that problem.
Yeah.
They recognize that problem and they fix the system by increasing salaries, motivating staff, rotating staff, creating all of those things, right? That's an option for us to look at, and it's not impossible for us to not implement it here in Trinidad and Tobago. There's no political will here, right? Yeah. We're still dealing with a Department of Personnel Administration and the CPO, when that should be one big unit of each complements, right? The Singapore model, we've been hearing it since the time of Pandey, and there are elements of the Singapore model that can be utilized. Again, everything has to be contextualized. It can't simply be, look at the Singapore model. There are aspects of it that we could take for innovation, to, as you rightfully say, running a country that has no gas and no natural resources, but they went to financial services and other things like that. There are frameworks, there's legislation, and there's also political will.
Yeah.
And whether or not we don't want to paint the country red, yellow, blue, or green, the fact of the matter is one of those colors are going to form the government, and they must have the political will to make it happen. And if they don't have the political will to make it happen, we, the people, should be able to speak about it. Coming back to why, and that is the reason why yellow and any other color that substitutes the red is held at a different standard. Sometimes, and we've even examined that, sometimes unreasonably so, because there's a higher expectation that this grouping of persons will come and do a better job.
Yeah, is it because, and to some extent, you can't fault them for doing it, but the whole point is the initial campaign would be, we will be better than.
Yes.
And then now, technically, when there isn't enough tangible evidence to say we are better than, the psychological aspects of, well, I'll just go back to the other guy if it's equal.
Going into 2025, even from now as they get prepared, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar has to make very difficult decisions. And difficult decisions that is going to get her into office at least one more time. Because at her age, there's only so much she can run again. And she needs to be able to understand that her party needs to invigorate the population. It needs to find new minds, better minds, brighter minds, innovative people, innovative thinkers.
How true is it? Because with all of the internal conflict, there seems to be a sense of the organization of the party, not the literal organization itself, but it being organized and structured and being able to do things in a proper manner has come under question.
Remember this. This is an election. It's a competition. Within recent times, Senator Sagram Singh Sukla has been doing these little videos, these vlogs, about her road to claiming winning St. Augustine, right? This is a competition, and a competition that has to be won on strategy, and one has to be very, very what's the word, clinical and astute as to when you show your hand. If you show your hand now, what is going to happen?
I'll just say this to wrap up, because they need us to wrap up. But one of my issues with both parties, and yes, I know Mova doesn't like when I do this, but I'm sorry, I see commonalities. I don't see a lot of strategy beyond things directed to the base. That's generally what a lot of politicians do, and I think it's because it's the easy, it's the obvious. It's similar to the private sector. Innovation, it's not just with regards to the politicians. The private sector, we ain't seeing a lot of innovation from either. We ain't seeing what is the next business model that's going to take off in Trinidad. We're not seeing that, right? With regards to the politicians, what my issue is, I am not confident that they are willing, not that they're not smart, but they are willing to actually utilize intelligence approaches.
Well,
right, to be strategic.
To start with that, you can't, as Indira also said, you can't be intimidated by intelligence. And you have to understand that that's why when you asked me about if I wanted to interject in what Indira was saying, I said no, because I respect Indira's knowledge and her understanding of economics and that sort of thing. And I see it from a socio-political perspective. She sees it from a socio-economic perspective. You merge the two, you get a framework, right? So you can't, yes, there are persons that the UNC and any other party could lean upon for intellectual assistance or to be part of a team, but you have to be willing to understand that those persons bring a different level of thought.
Isn't that, I'll say this is one thing that we haven't necessarily observed from the TPP, so we could exclude them.
Yes.
Some of the other parties are too small to potentially qualify for this. But doesn't this seem to be par for the course of politics in this country? Or you're smart. Notice, this is something similar with dictators. I can't have you being smart and independent thinking, because then you might grow a brain and be independent of me, so I need to get rid of you.
But even if you have a brain, and even if I have a brain, you have to also read your audience. And you need to also be able to read your room.
Well, they read the base.
And forget the base. The base is going to come.
They don't seem to read much beyond the base.
Well, they have work to do. And from what I understand, there's attempts to make, there are attempts being made to position it to be better. We can only hope and wait to see and continue championing the fact that it needs to happen.
I'll close with this, folks. I will say to Dr. Mohamed's point, when the opposition leader wanted to have symposiums on crime, she did it under the banner of the leader of the opposition. And I made the comment, why is the Prime Minister countering that with conversations with the PM in all red? And after I said that, the red was removed. No man wore a PNM shirt after that. Maybe it was me, maybe it was somebody else. I don't know. With that said, thank you, Dr. Mohamed, for joining me. Thank you, Dr. Sajiwan, for your incredible insights and passions. Folks, that is something that we cannot, you won't know how valuable it is until we lose it, so I would advise you to appreciate it now while we have it. With that said, remember your allegiance to the Republic. Stay safe out there. Make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would always say, and we will see you next week. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
WESN.